Welcome to Cisco Tech Beat, the podcast that explores the people and stories behind what inspires the newest innovation. I'm your host, AB, and I'm thrilled to welcome two fantastic guests to the show today. Anthony Grieco, SVP and Chief Security and Trust Officer, Security and Trust Organization, and Eric Wenger, Senior Director, Technology Policy, Global Government Affairs. Gentlemen, welcome to Tech Beat.
AB,
thanks for having us.
Great to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we finally made it happen.
This conversation. It's been a long time cooking, so this will be good.
I know. We're on to dessert now. We already did the cooking and we couldn't make it happen, so we're here. So thanks again. And Anthony, I'm actually going to start with you because I want to dive into resilience, which I know is a key theme across the technology industry, especially as we kind of face more sophisticated threats and disruptions. So what is resilient infrastructure? I mean, what does that mean to Cisco? And, why is it so important in today's evolving threat landscape?
Yeah, look, this is I think the silent thread that's living inside of our digital worlds, especially in our enterprise customers and the world that we live in as Cisco. This notion of adversaries going after the network infrastructure is something that people really need to get their head around. So you mentioned the threat environment. I think this is the number one thing that if you look at the trends, Talos reports, what we're observing as well, adversaries are attacking the network infrastructure. We're so used to security people, the history of adversaries going after endpoints and trying to get you to click on a link in an email and all that sort of stuff. And that's the way that they compromised environments. Today, right. What we're seeing is adversaries are going after the network infrastructure, and that's a target. And so when we think about resilience, we're really focused as a company on how do we raise the bar from a security perspective inside of the network infrastructure so that it is resilient in the face of that kind of ongoing adversarial attack. We put a ton of energy into this world, and we'll talk more about it today, of secure by default, removing insecure ways to do things, and all this kind of foundational work to raise the level of resilience of the network infrastructure. And we need our customers leaning in to adopt that. And so for us, resilience is the name of the game when it comes to infrastructure, not just because of adversaries, but you also need to be resilient for AI. You can't build an AI future on top of a crumbling network. Even if the network is working today, it may not be ready for the AI future tomorrow. So resilience is the name of the game.
Totally. Love that. Eric, I'm going to dive into sort of a different pool here with regard to the WPI strategy, which I know was a commission report. I want to get the title right. It was Update Critical, Counting the Cost of Cybersecurity Risks from End-of-Life Technology on Critical National Infrastructure. I know that sort of centers around how end-of-life technology can really impact or at least increase cybersecurity risks to national infrastructure. So what are some of the striking or the more striking findings that you can share from that report regarding, end-of-life technology?
Yeah, and just to connect up this thought with the conversation you were having with Anthony, it's really important for us to have some sense of how big this problem is of technology that is unmanaged, that is unpatched, and in many cases unpatchable. And as Anthony said, you can't build your AI future or your quantum networking future on infrastructure that is crumbling. And so but we don't have a lot of information about how big this problem is. And what we did was we commissioned a report through a consultancy in the UK, WPI, to look at across a number of different geographies and a number of different sectors, could we start to put some numbers to this problem? And so technical debt in our critical infrastructure it's a hidden and growing liability. We have a lot of equipment that's been running in closets that seems to be doing its job in terms of routing and switching, but it's increasingly vulnerable. And that shadow liability grows over time. We know that it doesn't become any cheaper to operate technology that is unmanaged, unpatched, and unpatchable. And so you have liabilities and vulnerabilities that are created by IT systems and equipment and infrastructure that are so outdated or near end of life that they're not supported by the vendors any longer. And so what we found was we looked across a number of different geographies, UK at one end of the spectrum, Japan at the other end, in terms of effectively managing this problem. And then sectors within those countries as well too. So the greatest risk we found was in the healthcare industry in the UK, and we found that this problem was most effectively managed in the countries that we looked at in the financial sector in Japan. And as with any debt, the more you ignore it, the more it grows. And so that's the concern that we were trying to get a handle on. Because if you're not measuring a problem, it's impossible to make sense of whether or not you're gaining traction in solving it.
Absolutely. And you would think that the healthcare industry would be just as important in terms, and it probably is, in terms of having that, that infrastructure be solid, just like the financial industry. We're talking about people's lives here. So that's a crazy finding.
Yeah, I mean, there are things about the healthcare sector. First of all, some of this in the different geographies we were looking at depends on how the technology is managed, and then whether or not you have a concerted effort being put at trying to address that risk. Healthcare can be a complicated space because you're passing equipment off between doctors on shifts and things like that. So that may be one area where
Sure.
we see some complexity that's hard to get at. But again, if we're not trying to size this problem, we can't make sense of whether or not we are gaining traction in solving it.
Absolutely. And Anthony, I'm going to kind of stick with this topic for a bit because I've heard you mention that we need to give people a jolt about the silent risk of aging infrastructure. So what is it that Cisco can do to, make a call to action to customers and really the industry in general when it comes to making sure they have a secure and updated network infrastructure?
Yeah, look, this is the silent thing. Eric alluded to it, right? These things just keep working. Our hardware and it just keeps on chugging well past its kind of useful lifetime in terms of supportability, well past its useful lifetime in terms of security. And so we're grabbing the reins both proactively in kind of what we're doing in development, but also kind of raising awareness to this problem. Just because it's working doesn't mean it's safe. And that really becomes a critical sentiment that needs to be in people's psyche and understanding. Oftentimes, people aren't even thinking about assessing and understanding what they have that is past end of life and into support. And the study that Eric alluded to with WPI, I think, is a really important one. And the takeaways around end of life is really important. But there's something that end of life is an indication of. Yes, first and foremost, it is this notion that we or any other vendor are not out patching those things for security vulnerabilities, and therefore there's a set of risks and liabilities that come along with it from a security perspective. But more subtly, it also tells you a couple of really important things. You probably have not changed how you're managing that network infrastructure in a really long time, because that old end-of-life equipment can only be managed in the old end-of-life ways, right? So it doesn't support the modern ways to do security and management of the systems. And so when you think about it as a problem at its core, but it's also an indicator of you're not really thinking about how you operationalize security inside this network infrastructure. This is the thing that we need customers to be aware of. So what are we doing about it? We are changing a bunch of things in our product and portfolio. We're really driving towards removing insecure ways of doing things. We're frankly going to force our customers to face the fact that the way that they're doing these things, when they upgrade to the software that we're producing now, that they can't do it as nearly as easily and securely as they used to. And that's really kind of the one big forcing functions. But frankly, AB, talking to you is another thing that we're spending a lot of time doing. Eric and I have become the dynamic duo here, where we're trying to get as many people to pay attention to this problem as we can, because the switches and aging infrastructure and the wiring closets can't yell loud enough for people to hear. So we're here on their behalf to say we need attention and we need people to pay attention to this problem.
I love when Anthony talks about this, that he points out that we're going to get loud, that we are trying to make people really aware of this problem and to have them understand that the status quo is not free, that just because you paid for it and it's sitting in a closet doesn't mean that there's no cost associated with continuing to run things the way they are.
Right.
And so essentially what we're doing is we are trying to simplify security at scale so that when you're running the supported versions of our technology and you're going to put your device into a state that is not secure, you're going to get a really loud warning that says, do you really want to do this? Do you want to use a deprecated protocol or a configuration that we don't recommend? Because in the past, what we would do is we would give hardening guidance to customers and then expect them to pore over these things configure it, and understand the choices that they were making in terms of what's the secure way to run this. And I think we've realized that that's a lot of complexity in order to accommodate some edge cases that on balance aren't worth it. And so we're first going to help customers get to a point where they recognize these warnings and be loud about it. And then eventually we're going to get to the point where we start to turn some stuff off that we say that doesn't belong there because it nets out in a way that almost always causes undue risk.
This notion of being loud it's really kind of subtle in some ways and obvious in others, but like we're putting warning messages in that say, if you do this, that you will be compromised, right? Wow. We're using very direct messaging with folks. It's not kind of alluding to the problem that you may be creating for yourself. It is hitting people between the eyes to let them know this sort of thing is something you need to pay attention to, and being super vocal about it in all sorts of ways.
Sure. And I think that's a great connection there to what Eric just said. So you will be compromised. And of course, the status quo is not free, meaning that because of those compromises, there's going to be some kind of a cost to you. So Eric, if I can go back to you for a second, what are some of those tangible costs when it comes to being compromised? Like what are these organizations going to incur financially and otherwise?
Yeah, so let's look at some research by Google that shows that the mean time to exploit has been dropping dramatically over the years. From 2018, the average time from the publication of a CVE to exploit was about 63 days. By 2023, we see that drop to about 5 days. And I think we can clearly forecast that the time is going to drop further, that the direction of travel is clear, that with the application and availability of AI tools, that even unskilled malicious actors will be able to reverse engineer patches more quickly, moving from weeks to days to hours and potentially even minutes. And so that's a cost we have to factor in. We see the U.S. government spends about $100 billion a year on IT. And about 80% of that is on maintenance and operations of the technology, probably mostly at the data and the application layer, keeping things up and running, keeping the lights on. And that crowds out the ability to move to technology that allows you to take advantage of AI, of quantum, to capture some of the benefits that Anthony talked about in terms of security engineering, where we have trust anchor modules that are capable of secure boot and firmware signing and board level configuration. All these things you're kind of leaving on the floor if you're not using the technology that's capable of capturing the benefits of security engineering. And the last thing I'll leave you with is security downtime. 56% of incidents are caused by system downtime, and that's causing somewhere in the range of $400 billion annually. About $9,000 every minute is coming from downtime from systems that are not being properly maintained.
Got it. How do we remove those like features that are kind of legacy features that are not necessarily either up to date or helping anymore or causing risk?
Yeah, the journey that we're on and is we have been working across the product teams for many years to kind of continually increase the security of our products. But we've really taken a step function recently in what we're delivering into the market now and over the next 12 months. Where when you upgrade to the latest pieces of software inside of our ecosystem, regardless of what part of our portfolio, like this is across our portfolio, which is a massive undertaking given how broad Cisco's portfolio is, there's going to be really important things that happen underneath the covers that are going to be observable to the administrators of those systems. First and foremost, if you're doing things with insecure protocols or insecure configurations, you're going to get broad, bright warning messages. They're going to be annoying. They're going to catch your attention. They're going to show up in your logs repeatedly until you do something about it. And so we're starting with a warning mechanism. Shortly thereafter, we're actually going to the step to remove the configuration ability to remove insecure protocols. So a classic example of that is Telnet. It's a way that people used to log into our systems many years ago and is an industry standard protocol that everybody's using and has used, but it's insecure and not fit for purpose in today's day and age to manage and administer systems. And so we're going to start removing those protocols and capabilities within the systems. And we're changing the defaults across the systems to be ensuring that they're at the most resilient and secure ways that we can be doing things today. In addition to that, we've introduced a bunch of new features and capabilities which continue to improve the security of already existing things. Authentication and authorization are certainly very active vectors for what adversaries exploit. So we've done a lot to improve the security of those things, not just in our portfolio. We're contributing these things to standards and IETF and others where we're bringing not just ourselves, but the industry along. And I think that's really the big thing for me is none of this is just about us. We're leading the way in what we're doing here, but frankly, this is an industry-wide effort that we're going to pushing folks to go do. The last thing that we're doing quite a bit of is enhancing the logging and monitoring capabilities. Too oftentimes, we think that there is a set of issues that we see in our customer environments where they're not even paying enough attention to their network infrastructure to know that they've had a security issue. And so by enhancing the logging and capabilities that we're doing in this space, there is a lot of effort that we can do to help our customers force them into this conversation about resilient infrastructure and frankly, force the industry to have this conversation as well.
Oh, totally. We need to help you use this new approach, but you're going to need support with that, right? I mean, it's like, how do we balance those two things?
Yeah, no, 100%. That's the dynamic that we need to break through on, because we have Talos threat intelligence teams that are seeing what are the greatest threats out on the internet, and we're incorporating that into the technologies, into the decisions we're making about the things that we believe are so unsecure that nobody should be doing them. But in order for us to offload that problem to us so that we can manage it more effectively for you, we need to be using the supported versions of technology. So if you're going to continue to run the stuff that's in your closet from 20 years ago, you're not going to benefit from not only the security engineering that I was talking about before, but the things that we've learned over time about configurations, about protocols that we believe are so fundamentally insecure. And that we're building them into this new model. And so come with us on that journey, but that means you need to be using modern Cisco technology.
I'm going to stick with you for a second, Eric, because I want to jump back to the WPI and some of the findings, because you work a lot with policy recommendations. So I'm wondering, does Cisco now have a motion to sort of offer guidance to policymakers, infrastructure leaders? Like, how are we helping them improve their lifecycle management and reduce some of that technical debt we talked about earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a government affairs organization that I sit inside of, and a lot of what we do is to help to translate the things that we've learned about security and about how to manage risk to not, both back inside the company. We help make sure that they understand how governments think about these things. But then as well, we're also a trusted advisor to governments around the world so that they have the insights of what we've been able to learn from our security engineering teams and as well too. And so I think what this points in the direction of is, first, you need to have a sense of what technology you are reliant on, because you can't manage the problem again if you can't see it. If you can't measure the things, and you can't make progress in trying to fix them. We also think it's really important to have an ongoing lifecycle management. So there may be decisions that you make about retaining technology that you can't afford to move off of, or that you've decided that you want to accept certain risks. But then you should be thinking about what are the compensatory controls that you can apply that would allow you to enhance vigilance around surveillance or isolate or segment the technology that you can't immediately move off of. There needs to be some further thought about how governments fund the technology that they're buying, because, for instance, governments very rarely buy cars anymore. They typically lease fleets of cars so that they're always using cars that are supported. And so that kind of model is increasingly being looked at and adopted by governments around the world too, to shift some of the things that they would use as a periodic capital expense into something that you would address as an operating expense over time. And that greatly benefits this problem. And then also I would point to incident reporting, that if you have incident reporting requirements, it might make sense to say, hey, also tell me whether or not the technology that was implicated by this incident had some dependency on things that were no longer supported. And that might help to spotlight this problem as well too. So we need to get our hands around how big this problem is. That was part of the impetus for the report, and then part of the reason that we're coming out to talk with you and others to make sure that people are aware of these findings.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important that our customers and folks that make decisions about this don't get kind of locked up worried about a future state with AI and what does it mean to this conversation. this is, and what the language we use in my team is, this is no regrets work. We need to go do this work regardless of what that next step is. And so making sure that we focus on that is really important.
Yeah, totally love that. Kind of wrapping up here, if you were to have an open platform, of course, TechBeat reaches everybody, but beyond this podcast, and you were going to just share a few sort of non-negotiable things that, whether it's a business enterprise level, policymakers, whatever, things that they really should just consider moving forward. And I know we're probably going to touch upon some of the things that were mentioned, like getting rid of old gear, getting new gear, but anything even beyond that that should really be considered as we move forward in terms of technology and infrastructure.
I think you can decide to accept risk, but if you're just ignoring it, then that's also a decision. The drummer from Rush wrote in the song Free Will that if you decide not to decide, you still have made a choice. And so we want people to be affirmatively making decisions about what technology that they are using and what risks they're accepting associated with that.
I love that. As a drummer, I approve that message. So
yeah, I see the drums in the background there, Eric, bringing the solid music reference. The biggest thing for me is, like, I think people just have to pay attention to the network. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And when we think about the world that our customers have been in, networks have been in the NetOps space and the network operator space, and the security teams have focused on endpoints and email and all those sorts of things. It's time for those worlds to collide. And I think when you really look at leading industries and leading organizations, they are thinking about this together. And I think that's really essential.
Amazing. Great advice from both of you. I think that's a perfect place to end this conversation. I just want to thank you both for being on the TechBeat podcast and sharing your thoughts around security and resilience and policy. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, and I hope that we can meet again in person at one of the other events coming up in the near future.
That sounds great.
So,
look forward to it.
It's a deal. It's a deal. Good. Thanks so much, AB, for taking the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.